Thank you. That would be exactly what I was asking, is if you guys could hear me, and hopefully this makes it better. Um, is this better? Do we have sound? And do we sound like we're in a tin can? All right. Looks like we have sound now. And so anybody who is out there today, thank you. Thank you for tuning in. This is another week, another stream, another visit from Claudia as she pops in today to talk about the power of hope. Hopefully, already we're into that word. You guys are feeling hopeful today. And whether you are struggling with alcohol addiction or not, we hope that you find something that you can take away from this stream and apply to your life and make it a better, happier, more hopeful place to live. So, Claudia.
Yes.
What are you feeling hopeful about today?
Oh gosh, I've had a very unhopeful couple of weeks, to be honest with you, and it's a very interesting conundrum, and I thought I would share. I wouldn't say that it's a frustration, and I've put a lot of energy and time and effort into certain projects, and they've just literally gone nowhere. And I feel like that old, and I have this stick-to-itiveness and this stubbornness and this sort of, Teutonic work ethic that says, well, just if a door closes, just try another door. Well, I kept telling myself this, and I kept sort of, banging my head up against that door. And then when that door wouldn't open, I went, oh, this will work, and make a long story short, it accumulated in about 2 days ago. I literally hit the wall of just saying, I give up. I'm done. I didn't even have hope. I didn't have any real feeling like things were going to get any better or improve in that avenue of my life. I thought that I had put in an extraordinary amount of effort, and I just said, you know what? Clearly there's a reason why this is not happening, so I'm just going to push it aside. But it hurt because I'm such a hopeful person, and I had given up hope, and it's a really interesting process to try to wrap your head around something that brings you joy but you can't attain it, and that's the sort of thing I've been struggling with the past couple of weeks. Today's the first day that I thought, okay, there's a plan out there in the universe, and you just have to keep trudging along. But it's not necessary to keep whacking, the whack-a-mole. I don't have to keep playing whack-a-mole right now. I can just sort of let it simmer, as they say in cooking terms, in the back of the stove. Just put it on the simmer and focus on making an omelet, because right now the stock ain't gonna boil. So that's been my feeling of late. However, I must say that there is hope sown within that, in the fact that slowly venturing out a little bit. I had dinner out of this house for the first time last night, which was extremely exciting. Albeit it was in a parking lot in a tent, because that's what they do nowadays for COVID. But still, I was out of the house, and that gave me a lot of hope to see a friend who was fully vaccinated, and to eat something that I didn't cook, particularly, a cuisine that I'm not particularly good at, Japanese. So that was hopeful. And to see my friend who's elderly, healthy, that gave me hope. So there has been some glimmers of hope strewn in with some glimpses of, I think, reality mixed with hopelessness.
And you mentioned hopelessness, so I'm going to go through and do my obligatory definition time today. So definitions with C3 Foundation is on tap here. So so when we talk about hope, hope is defined as a feeling of expectation and a desire for a certain thing to happen. So hope gets intertwined pretty intensely with our expectations. So that's something to kind of put on our back burner for this conversation, because I'm sure that it'll come back again, how expectations tie into and can help influence our feelings of hope and also hopelessness, which hopelessness is defined as incapable of solution, management, or accomplishment. Now, when you think about that, incapable, that's a pretty overwhelming word to pile on top of the emotion that goes with hopelessness. So we're going to also put that on our back burner. We'll let that simmer in your pot, and I'm sure that will come up again as well. So as we talk about hope, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about hopelessness, because they're opposites. They're both extremes as well, because hope can carry so much positive emotion and motivation and carry you into action, whereas hopelessness can feel just completely and utterly overwhelming and spur you to inaction. So, I can see there's about 20 people out there in our audience right now that are watching us through Twitch Live in the chat function area. So, with a Y for yes or an N for no, can you think of a time when you have felt hopeless? Yeah, and it doesn't have to be restricted to alcohol use disorder. It doesn't have to be restricted to addiction. But when you felt like you had just a completely hopeless situation or something that you were dealing with. And Claudia, as you would imagine, the Ys are starting to trickle in at a pretty decent pace, because I personally don't know anyone who would say no to that.
Relationships, living situations, work, addiction, health. I mean, there's so many subjects that can run into that feeling of hopelessness that I'm sure everybody has felt it at times.
And when you're feeling hopeless, and audience, I'd love to see you take part in this as well. What other emotions or feelings do you associate with feeling helpless or hopeless?
I would say desperation, sadness, grief.
And I see anxiety from now. Donkey Bomber says fear.
Yep.
Hopelessness can leave people feeling angry too, because there's such a sense of and which Bruce actually wrote that just as I was saying it, anger and frustration, because when you feel that a situation is hopeless, you feel powerless to do anything about it. And I don't know about you, but I know for myself and for a lot of people I've encountered, man, when you feel powerless to change something, that makes me angry, because I'm a very strong, capable person. So if I feel like there is nothing I can do to change a situation, I kind of get really angry about that.
Any human likes to be out of control. And if it's something external that we cannot control, it makes us feel extremely helpless, hopeless, angry, and especially if you're making massive amounts of effort to change the situation and nothing is working. That's where, that's how people become suicidal. It gets to the point where you just feel there is no hope left. What's the point?
Exactly. There's a what's the point? There's the F it moment.
Yeah.
Belunky Boy says apathetic. That's another really good one.
That is a very good one. When you lose, it's almost like you become dead. because hope gives you life. It gives you an expectation of happiness in some way, sense, or form, or at least relief. So if you have a little spark of hope that things are going to change or get better or open up or anything, that gives you that motivation to keep going. That's and when that leaves you, you just, it's, you feel dead.
Yeah. Now, thinking back to experiences and times when you felt you were either in a hopeless situation or that, and we see this a lot with people we help, people who actually believe that they are hopeless. Thinking about those experiences and those times and those stories, once you're removed from those situations, and I'd love to see chat feedback on this as well, were they as hopeless as you thought they were in the moment?
Well, I can attest to the fact that everything is magnified when you're under the influence, including hopelessness. I mean, that is magnified to the nth degree. I cannot tell you how many 3 o'clock in the morning nights I had where I woke up and just said, everything's going to shite. I mean, I'm never going to work again. I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to die. My liver's probably corroding right now. Just all these, nobody loves me. Just negative, 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 the hour of the wolf, as they say. But that was definitely because of alcohol, so there can be also chemical imbalances that lead to that sense of doom.
Yeah. As Nat says, when you're out of the moment, no, because hindsight is a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's the thing, is in the moment, it feels all encompassing and overwhelming. And when you're removed from that, you realize that A, you have survived this.
Yeah.
B, even if it didn't work out the way you wanted to, eventually it came to an end in most cases, unless it's something that's currently you're still actively dealing with. But in most cases, once you're removed from the situation, they're never as hopeless as you feel like there are in the moment.
Or something happens to change your circumstances, your destiny, and that replaces that hopelessness with a little whisper of hope. And it doesn't have to be that other thing magically worked out. It could be another thing that now has your attention. But yeah, usually when you look back, you say, wow, that felt really awful going through it. But not only did I make it through it, but it's all better. It was a learning experience. But at the time, it doesn't feel good.
Right. And for anybody who didn't see our talk a couple of weeks ago on shame and stigma, which was a very powerful, very raw, emotional stream we did a few weeks ago. It's to date the only one that I've literally put a trigger warning on the replays. We talked about the effects that shame and stigma can have on individuals, and some of that shame and stigma can actually induce hopelessness, which is why it's so important to deal with those feelings and the shame, and why those on the outside, those in the treatment industry who should know better but don't act better, need to stop sending external stigma at people who are actively trying to get better and better themselves.
It's better. It's hard to do, but when you're in that moment of feeling hopelessness, it really is an exercise when that negative self-talk comes into you to just try and focus on anything that is positive in your life, anything else. And it's easier said than done. I understand that, but you have to almost make a list of things you can refer to that you're grateful for. And that's not being hoobie-jooby. It literally can take you out of that committee spinning negative self-talk. So if you're focused, so hyper focused on, oh my God, I didn't get that job that I wanted. Oh my God, that job, I'm such a loser and everything, and I have nothing. No, then you've got to focus on your health or your friendships or something, or the fact that, you have a parent that's still alive or that you love, or that you have something, anything, a car that runs. I mean, look, sometimes I've had to get down to the nitty gritty basics to find something like, a really great cup of tea. Okay, I've got that. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but in doing that, it relaxes me, it relieves anxiety and stress, and I start to focus on the small things that are nice. Oh, the weather is nice today, as opposed to this looming dark cloud of failure, because that's really what hopelessness is. When you look at it, you feel like you've failed at something. You have no hope that it's ever going to happen or be rectified. So that means you are a personal failure. You failed in a relationship, you failed at getting a job, you failed at what now you're hopeless. And it's a horrible feeling to be in. So we have to, just like we spoke of in Shame and Stigma, we have to talk ourselves out of these things by constantly reminding ourselves of anything positive, anything worth living for, anything that will drag us out of that miasma and give us a little inkling.
Yeah, because it can cause a cycle. I mean, you can have someone who is dealing with hopelessness, which oddly, when I ran a Google search for addiction and hopelessness, everything that came back was addiction and depression.
Yeah.
So I found that a little bit odd, because I think when you're talking depression, especially at a clinical level, that I think that's different than hopelessness. And so I found that really odd that a search would basically come up empty.
It is weird.
But what we've seen is that, addiction and hopelessness can definitely go hand in hand, and either can cause the other. Your addiction can cause you to feel hopeless. Your sense of hopelessness can drive you to seeking a substance or behavior, depending on exactly what the addiction is. That can, and then it just creates this powerful feedback loop where each one strengthens the other. So what we're hoping to do today is really talk about some ways to break the cycle, because once you're in the cycle, it can feel very hard to get out. That's the whole point of why you feel hopeless, because you feel stuck. You're in a cycle that you don't know how to break. And just remember, at no point are we saying that you can simply choose your way out of depression or wish your way out of, or plan your way out of any of these things. That is absolutely not at all what we're saying. So if at any point in time we accidentally misspeak, please remember that is not at all what we're trying to say, because we know that is not possible.
Not implying that a cup of tea is going to fix everything.
Right. We know a cup of tea or coffee isn't going to fix depression and hopelessness. We know that just thinking about it and choosing, you can't choose your way out of depression or anxiety or anything like that any easier than you can just choose your way out of addiction. It just doesn't work that way. So just know that we're not saying any of that. But love to hear from you guys. And Claudia, what are some things that you are currently hopeful about?
For me, I'm hopeful that I'm hopeful that I'm going to get some clarity on a few things in my life. I'm hopeful on a very sort of superficial level, but it means a lot to me. I'm hopeful to be able to travel again in my life, because I I love meeting new people. I love learning in different countries. I wish I could teach again, like I did in India. I mean, I really that fed my soul, and I miss it a lot. Uh, so I'm hopeful that that's going to start opening up a little bit soon. What about you, Jenny? What are you hopeful for?
I am hopeful that some of the projects that we've been working on this year are going to have a huge impact. For what we're seeing is every month these live streams are reaching more people per broadcast hour than ever before. We're leading up to our conference, which is international. It's bringing in some, much needed funding through sponsors, which allows us to keep this for free. I look at what we did with our conference last year, and we planned that from the hip in less than 6 weeks, and it made a huge impact on people. And then this year, knowing that we've been planning since September, maybe, and my programming team, in fact, Belenky Boy has been my right hand through all the programming, doing a great job keeping things organized.
We
But
have some great speakers. I mean, really
amazing.
I was looking at the topics that people are submitting, and I'm excited to watch it, frankly.
Well,
you know,
we're gonna have speakers from, I think it's 6 different countries, including the U.S. We're and they're talking about so many different ways of using the Sinclair method, and with different backgrounds going into it all, that I feel like this is really, I'm very hopeful that this is going to really break through that barrier that we occasionally have with mental and medical health professionals who are skeptical, because we're seeing almost exclusively doctors, nurse practitioners, prescriber level, but also mental health. So these are addiction professionals who are using the Sinclair method all around the world.
yeah,
And they're going to be talking not just to people who are using it, but to their peers.
yes,
And so much of what I've done, especially in the last 3 to 4 months, has centered around this conference because of all of the hope that we have for the impact that this could bring. So that's my big thing. Let's run through some of these comments. Somebody is hopeful. Mudforce is hopeful getting the second COVID jab soon. We've got hopeful about the country. Hopeful about taking trips. Someone says their doctor is one of the speakers at the conference. So that's awesome.
That's awesome.
So when you're thinking about being hopeful, what other emotions do you think of that you're feeling when you're feeling hopeful?
Oh, excitement and happiness and relief, and it's an energizing of the spirit, a sort of all of my senses go when there's something that I think, wow, I'm really hoping that comes through. It's almost like a drug effect. The endorphins start popping because it creates fantasy. So and your mind starts going. Let's say I'm up for a series that shoots in Toronto, and I'm hopeful because I did a really good audition. Suddenly in my mind, I'm like, I'm in Toronto, baby. Oh my God. Wouldn't that be so cool? And the thing, and you fantasize. And of course, I've been doing that for almost 40 years. So I'm used to the ups and downs of that fantasy life, and that hoping and then rejection, and hope, rejection, hope, rejection. But I still am that 16-year-old girl who went up for her first audition and had hope, because regardless of all of the no's, I've had a few yeses along the way, and I'm still gambling. I'm still pulling that lever, going, because it thrills me to have that hope, that that thing, that you could look forward to, something to look forward to. And I know that the whole purpose of life is to find happiness in the moments between things that you're hoping for or looking forward to. I understand that. That means being present and mindful in this moment and grateful in this moment. But let me tell you something. It's a hoot to have something that you're hoping will come to fruition, because it really sparks your imagination and your fantasy life.
And TSM Scotland says we only need one yes among the no's.
Exactly. You are so right. And that's the eternal optimist can sometimes be viewed as someone who is just not getting it. It's like, oh, why don't you just give up? But there is also a certain charm in remaining optimistic, because it means that you haven't lost hope. You haven't lost hope. So I believe that little tinkling of optimism leads to, that burning ember of hope that remains within your soul for the thing that you most want, whether it's true love or an opportunity to publish a book, whatever it is, a home. I think there's a way to treat that tenderly and to retain that hope without being disappointed.
And I think that a little bit of what you're talking toward right now is resilience.
Yeah.
Because what it sounds like you're saying is that you're using your hope to propel you past the negative points so that you don't get stuck on them.
It's sort of the old, pull up your bootstraps kind of thing of like, well, that didn't happen. The reason why there's so many cliches like, well, that door didn't open, another opportunity will arise, all those cliches, is because we've all been through it. And we need this reasoning behind, why are we even getting up again in the morning after we've been rejected 1,000 times in a row? Well, because a little part of human nature is to say, I could get that job on 1,001. I don't want to give up now. You see, it's like Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill, up the mountain, and then you get to the top of the mountain and it rolls back down. Well, he just keeps pushing it up that mountain.
I actually have a pair of socks that have a little stick figure doing that, and the caption it says, "Well, this sucks."
Yes, but it's almost like it's such a wonderful reward when you've been pushing that rock up the mountain for so long, and then finally you get on top of the mountain, the rock stays put, and you're jumping up and down. There's that feeling of "I told you so" achievement, and that fantastic relief. Talk about a dopamine rush. It's like, wow, I finally got what I wanted. And maybe had it happened much sooner in the process, you really wouldn't appreciate it as much. There's something about working towards something and keeping faith in something that when it does happen, you can. I spoke to somebody who's interesting about love, that they had been single for a hell of a long time and had some horrible dates. I mean, crappy date after date after date after date, like 200 of them. I'm not exaggerating, like 200 horrible dates with horrible people. And I was talking to her, and she finally met somebody nice. And she said to me, you know what? I never would have appreciated this person so much had I not been through 5 years of hell. Because now she realizes what she has, and all that 5 years of horrible dates and getting dressed up for nothing and all that disappointment and she didn't give up on the idea of finding somebody that she gets along with.
And it sounds like a situation of, and you mentioned this earlier, learning through 500 bad experiences exactly what she didn't want.
Exactly. That's the thing. You learn exactly you learn your boundaries, what you will and will not put up with. You mature along the way. You have all this knowledge, and then you meet this person and say, okay, maybe they don't have X, Y, Z, but boy, they have this, and that's far more important than those other things that I thought I wanted. Common decency, politeness, manners, that kind of thing. Well, suddenly those look really good.
So, and I'd love to get the chat feedback on this one as well. Are we more successful because we have hope, or are we more hopeful because of our successes?
Say that again. Are we more
Are we more
successful?
successful because we have hope, or
Right.
are we more hopeful because of our successes?
That's a trick question there. That's it. Well,
I'd
I
love to
mean,
hear which the audience thinks.
do successes necessarily make you hopeful? I suppose it conditions you to think that you have a chance. That it's happened before, so it might happen again. Maybe that's why I'm still in Hollywood acting, because it happened before I got hired. Either that or complete naivete. She just won't get the point. um, that's an interesting conundrum, because you really, I mean, be it, whew,
Well,
what is the
Esther says both.
both? Well,
Bruce says they reinforce each other. My notes, I just put yes. Just as addiction and hopelessness can cause a cycle where either one can start the cycle that just wraps you like a tornado, so can hope and success. Let's face it, with the people that you've talked to and talked through TSM over the years, is it easier for people who come into TSM saying, I have so much hope this is going to work, as opposed to someone who's like, I'm going to do this. I don't think it's going to work, though?
Well, of course, power of the mind and power of suggestion are definitely real things. But I do see the entire gamut. I've seen people
Right. So there are people who don't think they have no they're trying TSM out of desperation at first because they don't think it's going to work, but then when they start to see success, then they become hopeful, and that success then spurs the hope.
Or yes, that is that's the scenario that I've run into many times. Or the person who just saw one of our videos and they'd never heard of it, and they go, oh my God, I have so much hope that this is, because they're literally have heard of nothing remotely other than what they've tried. But there are elements, there's also the loss of hope that you get when somebody's in year 2 and suddenly their drinking is escalating and they feel hopeless. They think, oh my, that brings back tremendous nightmares. Like, this thing that was working so well for me, now I'm drinking, my drinking is escalating, and they start to lose hope. But once again, that's simply making small changes, and you veered off a little off course, and now we're going to correct the boat. But yeah, I think in addiction you go through multiple stages. You have hope when you go into rehab. You have hope in your first AA meeting. You have hope when you start TSM. If you're a normal person, you're just hoping desperately that something will stick, something will work. I don't think people go into situations, think, I'm going to commit to going to medical school, but I have no hope that that I'm going to be successful. You have to have some sort of hope when you go walk into something, unless you've been forced into it.
Yeah, I think the hope of other people can only carry us so far.
Yeah, it's I can have great hope that this. Do you know how many people that I know in my life that are misusing alcohol, and I would hope to hell that they would take advantage of my resources, of us, but they don't.
Yeah.
So it's not that I've given up hope. It's just after this long of doing this, I realize when the time is right for them, they know where I am.
Exactly.
I have not given up hope on them at all. I just know that I can't push anymore.
So let's talk about some ways we can shift from hopelessness to feeling hopeful, because let's face it, the cycle doesn't break itself.
No, I as I was talking about before, it's that constant negative self-talk that we need to learn how to steer and maneuver away from that before it gets really devastating or destructive for ourselves. So, I mean, I have my own practices that I do. I bring myself back to me. I've been known to say, to stop myself in the middle of a negative, hopeless dialogue and just say, I love you, Claudia. Just stop and put my hand on my heart and just calm the hell down. Just take a step back. I've been known to force myself to go outside for a few minutes and take some deep breaths, or walk around the neighborhood, or go touch a tree, anything to get me out of that headspace of, oh my God, there's no hope, it's never going to happen. Bo, wow, get out of the room. Physically get out of the room. And also those reminders, that's a lot to me. That's why I find prayer and meditation extremely helpful to my own sense of mental health, because I focus on things that I'm grateful for in that, whether I'm meditating or praying. It's always just a constant reminder of what's positive. Even if I have to drag things out that sound ridiculous, I will drag them up and put them on display in my meditation or prayer to say, look at this, focus on this, so but it is a practice. It takes practice. You can't just snap yourself out of it by saying, oh, it's a beautiful day. I mean, I'm not suggesting that in any sense of the word.
Well, I know from dealing with a chronic health issue that, like addiction, anything that's chronic, you're going to have your good days, and you're not going to have your not so good days, and then you're going to have your absolutely terrible no good days. When you're having the really bad days, when you're stuck in that thought, that's the most difficult time to try to do anything. So what I've personally found is you got to plan on your good days and your not so bad days, to say, okay, when the bad days come, what can I do to interrupt? What can I do to interrupt that thought process, that feeling of hopelessness? You mentioned earlier, keep a gratitude board, just something, a list. I'd love to hear from the audience what you guys do when you get caught in one of those spirals, no matter whether it's about addiction or not. And because we've gotten some feedback, Claudia, I don't know if I shared this with you, but we're finding that we're resonating with some people on these streams for things beyond alcohol addiction, which I love. I love knowing that we're resonating on, because these topics are just so relevant both in and outside of addiction.
I was thinking about, you just triggered a thought of mine when you were talking about a chronic illness. I actually had an activity today because I have to have surgery on my leg and I have chronic pain in the hip, and I was walking today and I immediately was going through, what is your pain level today? Is it a 4 or 5? And all of it I realized was negative. And I shifted it to saying, you're walking. 2 weeks ago, you had a day when you couldn't walk. You were in agony. And I'm walking. But I literally had to stop myself. And I said, Claudia, why are you focused on the pain? Focus on the fact that you are able to go out and do what you love to do, which is working out. You're able, even if it's only 1 mile, you're doing it, as opposed to 2 weeks ago when you didn't do it. So when you said, how do I prepare for the really crappy days? That's a really good idea. It's almost like putting tools in the basket of saying, okay, on the good days, focus on that feeling so that you can remember it for the really bad days. And it's true, because sometimes pain is not consistent, and sometimes illness is not consistent. So you have really good days, and then where you don't think about your illness or your pain, and then you've got days when it's all you can think of. So,
yeah, I mean, I've found that self-care goes a long way, because let's face it, how much more intense is the feeling of being overwhelmed or hopeless when you're exhausted or when you haven't been eating right.
It's really bad. It makes everything a hell of a lot worse. Hell of a lot worse. And it's, once again, I think this goes back to one of our Twitch sessions a few months back when we said, it's self-care. It's not all bubble baths and rainbows and all that stuff. But there is something to the fact of those little moments of stopping the negative self-talk and the little moments of saying, I know I've got a lot on my plate right now and it's stressing me out, but I'm just going to take 10 minutes to myself. I'm going to either sit down and meditate, or I'm going to read a chapter of a book. I'm going to get outside of my mind. I'm going to take this moment. I'm going to make that cup of tea. I'm going to do something that is not so stressful. And we're not talking about having to go on a 5-mile nature hike. I'm talking about 5 minutes just of stopping. And this works for addiction. It works for pain. It works for a lot of things that stress, somebody that's really, really bothering us, and it triggers all of that stuff. If you just stop what you're doing and do something else that makes you happy inside, just for a moment.
And again, this is something that you should think about on those days when you're having a better day, when it's one of your good days, because again, you're not going to be thinking about, oh, well, what is it that I should do to interrupt what these thoughts are on when you're having a really bad day. If you're in the middle of a binge, it's probably not the time that you're going to start thinking about the happiest parts of your life. So you've, tools. I mean, even something as simple as have a music playlist that can help redirect you out of whatever you're feeling. Yeah. For those of you, I mean, who out in the audience has pets? I had, up until a few years ago when she passed away, I had one of the most intuitive dogs that I have ever met. And I think it's a black lab thing. But if I wasn't feeling well, if I had a migraine, she wanted to be right there, laying next to me, putting her head on my lap. She could just tell when I wasn't feeling right. And it was enough to jar me into a sense of, okay, this too shall pass. And I'm sure that anybody out in our audience who has cats or dogs is probably, Nat says one of my rats will curl up in my lap when I'm low or on my shoulder. He's just always there chattering at me.
Yeah, they're intuitive, animals are, and they do create a lot of. We know that it's endorphins and dopamine and happiness. They are very healing. It's one of the activities that Dr. Sinclair used to talk about. If you have an alcohol-free day, play with your pets. Go throw the Frisbee to your dog. Get one of those little cat toys and play with your cat for a little while, because that will produce that lovely feeling of happiness. So that's definitely a good one. Oh, and the music list is great. There's you can even watch live music. There's all these things online like So Far, where you can see live. You can see past recordings of live events for free. If you're feeling blue, you can go through and find some, Caribbean music or something, and take a peek at things that get you out of your mind space and cheer you up.
Esther says, I look at my butterfly and daffodil pics for several minutes. The smile then comes, then the happiness. Pictures can be wonderful.
And flowers. Oh my God, there's a jasmine patch down the street at a neighbor's house. And I if I'm feeling like I got to get out of my head, I'll walk down there and just smell it, because once a year it blooms for an extraordinary amount of time. So, yep.
Yeah, Mudforce says, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, Qigong breathing for 5 minutes quiets my brain.
Breathing exercises are paramount for so many, for mental health, for addiction, for recovery. Square breathing, holding it in.
It's funny because I'm one of those weird people that trying to do breathing exercises for me actually has the opposite effect.
It stresses
For
you
some
out.
reason, it stresses me out and raises anxiety levels. It's absolutely bizarre, but I've never actually claimed to be normal, so we're just gonna let that one slide. Yeah, another vote for breathing exercises in there, coming from Bruce.
Do the four-way ones. I always tell people when they have a trigger, just sit and breathe in deeply for 4 counts, hold it for 4 counts, and then let it out for 4 counts. That also works for anger. You know, if you're angry at somebody, try that just to calm yourself. Works for a lot of things.
And then there's also, have a trusted support system. Because, again, when you're having a really bad day, sometimes you just don't have the emotional bandwidth to pull yourself out. But if you have someone that you trust, that you can say, hey, I'm on one of my bad days. Can we talk? Or you just talk to me. Just hearing the sound of somebody else's voice to distract you can also be beneficial. So, and again, if you didn't get to watch our support system video, not only are we highlighting all of these videos on our Twitch to keep them here, but we're also uploading them all to our YouTube page as well. So they're in multiple places for you to watch. But Claudia and I talked about the support system a few weeks ago.
I would also say, just something that you mentioned there. A lot of people have a difficult time, myself included, asking for help. So I found that what I've done when I realized that a phone call or FaceTime with a friend would really help me, I've just taken the initiative and called them and said, hey, and on sort of this way of saying, what's going on with you, to get out of my own head. And then eventually I found every single time when they start to ask me what's going on, I can feel whether I'm comfortable enough to share it, and it's resolved itself in that way. Whether or not I bring up the issue I'm upset about or not, the fact that I'm taking the initiative and calling the friend, the sound of their voice or the laughing, it's an old friend, and so you sort of get out of that mind space, and it's healing, even though I didn't actually say, I need your help or I need your advice, because a lot of people do have a hard time doing that. So you can just pick up the phone, ask to chat, and that usually resolves it. What are you laughing about?
Well, our auto mod just I had to approve a message in here, and it's I'll have to go in and adjust the settings, because apparently typing the word dog is seen as hostile by the auto mod. Yes. So yeah, JM says, my flower gardens and dirt therapy are a huge happy place for me. My dog Roman is just like you described my dog. I call him my therapy dog, single a long time, and he's filled a void during my TSM journey.
I bet.
But yeah, so apparently the auto mod thought that was a hostile comment for some reason, which, so yeah.
Garden and a dog.
Garden and a dog. I can't think of anything less hostile than that.
It doesn't get much better than that. A garden and a dog, being outside in a garden and having a trusted companion. Nice. That's wonderful to have in your TSM journey.
Yeah. And again, it's just trying to take any measures that you can do to pull outside yourself. Being outside, mowing the lawn, if you enjoy that, which I do. Again, I never said I'm normal. Doing any kind of yard work, it can all be very grounding and just pull you out of your moment into something that's outside yourself long enough to help disrupt those negative feelings. Because, all of these things that we're mentioning, they might not take you out of it and solve your problem, and just, oh, you breathed right, so now you're just an instantly happy person. If only it worked that way, that would be fantastic. But
I used to, when I was trying to stay sober by traditional means, and I remember this, and I would be, craving or triggering and feeling sorry for myself. This is pre-TSM. I used to go talk to homeless people in my neighborhood. So I would go, let's say, to the drugstore and pick up whatever I needed. And then I would walk around the parking lot where they hung out, and I would just talk to them just to kill time, and to also sort of think to myself, think of somebody other than yourself. Just get their stories, because the stories were always interesting, and I could kill like a half an hour, 45 minutes shooting the breeze with somebody now.
Yeah, anything you can do to distract yourself and interrupt that cycle makes it easier to distract yourself and interrupt the cycle the next time.
Absolutely.
And they add up.
There's too much violence now going on down where the camp is. So I can't, don't take my recommendation of doing that if you live in a violent area.
Yeah.
But yeah, getting out of your own head, out of your own way as well.
And we see, sketching. That sketching is good. In fact, that comes from Nat, who incidentally, should probably pop one of the links into the TSM mindfulness coloring book that is benefiting C3 Foundation. Nat sketched out an entire coloring book that they've put online for to benefit C3 and to help people to just have something to take their mind in a different way. But you just mentioned something else, Claudia, that there's a lot of stuff going on right now in the world. It's so easy to become overwhelmed by it. It's so easy to be depressed and feel hopeless about it. Right now the world is facing a lot of things that, even if we all worked 24 hours a day on them, we can't address, between violence, the pandemic, racism, homophobia, all of these things that affect people on a personal level, and they all continue to add up as additional weights on our shoulders. So talk a little bit, if you will, about how to also remember to find hope when there are so many different seemingly hopeless situations that are all occurring around us, outside of us. So we can't always just step outside. Sometimes we have to step inside.
My biggest suggestion, and the thing that worked the best for me, is take a break from all news and all social media. And if that's for a couple hours or a couple days, it's up to you. But I found that it is enormously rewarding when you do that, because you don't realize how much you're inundated. Even if you're only on, let's say, Facebook or whatever, you're going to pick up negative stories constantly. The second I got off of the majority of social media, just being away from bullies and trolls, and being away from the constant feed of fear, because let's face it, media stories sell if they're fearful and if they're negative. That's what people, they're drawn into that. So if you just say, no, I'm not going to. Instead, I'm going to watch a documentary on something I like, or a silly film, or I'm not going to be on any devices. I'm going to read a good book. Just get away from it. I know when I've had enough news and saturated with COVID news. And I used to be on 5 COVID newsletters, and every day I would go deep dive into, well, and then I realized, what the hell am I doing? I'm just going to be as safe as I can, wear my mask, clean my hands, stay away from people. And then when I'm vaccinated, I will still employ safety measures, but I'm not going to read about all the deaths and this, it's like, Jesus. It's like when I used to watch the Gulf War on television, and finally I realized this is insane. What I'm, it's you can't keep filling your body with that kind of stuff if you're especially if you're an empath. It doesn't mean that we should be naive or unaware of other people's struggles or the pain, or we shouldn't be empathetic towards other people's struggles or the pain, but you can only watch so many stories on George Floyd or on any of these things before you become saturated with pain and negativity. So I think that's my biggest suggestion, is to take a break.
Yeah, taking those breaks also allows people then to be able to make constructive, beneficial things that you can figure out what you can actually do. Because just absorbing it all is just, if all you're doing is absorbing it, you're taking in the toxicity without actually being able to do anything to help yourself or anyone else about it. So definitely, again, it goes to support. Seek allies. Seek allies. Seek to be an ally. I know it's one of the things that I struggle with, because what we work on, you and I, addiction does not discriminate. It doesn't discriminate based on race, sex, sexual orientation, or anything. It's not bound by countries or by skin tone. And so it's just so important that, what we're doing as well is trying to reach beyond all of those barriers simultaneously.
Well, I think that if we circle back to hope, it's very easy to lose hope in society today, with all of the magnifying glass on all of these different socioeconomic issues. But that's why taking the attention away from it and thinking small or smaller is probably a good thing to do if you're finding yourself losing hope, and how that is related to your own life.
Yeah, I think that's a really good suggestion, because we can't fix giant global issues as much as we've tried with addiction. With alcohol addiction, we can't change a global issue overnight, no matter what we do. So what you and I have done that's been very beneficial for us, so that we don't lose hope that what we're doing matters, is we look for the small victories. Mm-hmm. We look for the small victories, and we share those victories with each other. We share those victories with the people who are bringing them to us. We share the victories of the people who are experiencing their first alcohol-free day, their first night of going out and not binging and waking up with. So even if what you're facing right now feels like it is overwhelming and you can't find any way out, look for the small things. As Claudia said, bring it home, bring it small, because every positive step that you acknowledge can help to start that cycle of more positivity, success, and hopefulness.
Absolutely. There's somebody knocking on my door. So
okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My doorbell's ringing out. Excuse me, everybody. I apologize. I'm so sorry.
We interrupt this program for Claudia to go answer her doorbell. So what other things are you guys doing to help you stay hopeful, especially with large scale, whether it's chronic illness, whether it's addiction, whether it's everything that's happening worldwide socially. Esther says, I've really had to minimize the news, see the headlines, and move away from most of them. It's definitely a good thing to do. As Claudia said, it's not being naive about it. You're still seeing the headlines. You're still aware that things are happening, but it doesn't mean you have to completely immerse yourself in it. Drawing healthy boundaries for news intake is definitely a good strategy to keep from losing all hope. What else do we have out there?
Oh, sorry. Somebody was lost, and I don't know why they were ringing on my doorbell. Like, what does it say? Thomas Guide on the front door? Scared the bejesus out of me. This is what it's like living in Los Angeles. If suddenly your doorbell starts ringing in the middle of the day, you think somebody's trying to break into your house. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. While you were gone, Esther mentioned, minimizing the news. We've got someone else that mentioned that, therapy can be a good way to take a little bit of weight off emotionally.
There's a lot of support groups online that you can dip into, whether it's for substance use disorders or community just in general. I think that it's not just about hobbies or distraction. It is about having some place to go when you're too much in your head.
Yeah, because talking to other people, again, as you mentioned, can remove you from the immediacy of your situation and the thoughts.
So can helping other people. I had a friend who, she goes in and out of depression, and she decided to help older people figure out ways to use the internet to get their vaccination appointments. And it distracted her on a nightly basis. She was fielding calls from her, one of those neighborhood chats where you can post on.
Okay.
So she offered her help to elderly neighbors. And so she had about 10 people she was helping. And she said it made her feel really good. Just it was a great way to spend the evening, talking them through it. And also she felt at the end of the day that she did something nice for somebody, and that took the pressure and the focus off of her own issues. So you never know what's going to help.
But helping just like in general, feeling hopeful, laughing, things like that, they all help produce endorphins. And when you feel better, when you feel good, you tend to feel more hopeful.
Totally. Yeah. So even if you can just do something for your general health, it does help. Once again, on a very superficial basis, because we've all been sort of locked inside and wearing sweatpants and everything, it's kind of nice to, get a haircut, take a shower, for us girls, maybe slap on a little lipstick and, make yourself look presentable for a change. I know that sounds really superficial, but
as someone who has not had a haircut in more than a year because of COVID,
no,
trust me, I know I will feel so good.
Yeah,
and
so good.
And our positivity rate is going in the wrong direction again. So I'm trying not to get discouraged, because it was almost at that level that I had set, saying, okay, well, when it starts to maintain below this level of positivity, I'm going to go get my hair cut. And we were so close.
Yeah.
And then it started going the wrong way.
Well, I tend to choose my outfits based on my mood too. So bright colors tend to make me feel a little bit more hopeful, So If you see me wearing a lot of black, it means that I'm really good. It means that I'm doing really well. If you see me wearing bright colors, it's just an effort to feel cheerful.
And that's yeah, that's something I hadn't even thought about. Is yes, colors.
Colors
Surrounding yourself with different colors
totally
can,
makes me feel
which is
different.
probably one of the many reasons why flowers and pictures of flowers
Sure.
can be
You
such a good thing.
put on a bright yellow shirt and tell me that you can't feel happy, or turquoise or some fabulous, or purple, you feel good. It sounds superficial and like a bubble bath, but whatever works, man. A chocolate chip cookie and a cup of tea and a purple shirt. Hey, great. Whatever.
Yeah. What? Yeah. Pretty much whatever it takes to break that cycle is.
Bring back the hope.
Yeah, because hope is a motivator. Hope is actually, it'll light up a very specific area in your brain. So it's more than just an emotion. It's more than just a thought. It actually affects your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's powerful. It's like, yeah, I mean, if you consider like any muscle, the whole use it or lose it factor, the more you can be hopeful about, even if even if it's something small, even if you have to write it on a post-it note, and this is where gratitude is really goes hand in hand with hope. There's the whole write it on a piece of paper and put it in a jar, and on your bad days just randomly pull out a piece of paper of something that you were grateful for to remind you of something good. It's not something that I've done myself, but it's something that I've heard many people talk about being beneficial to them. It'd be nice if it were as easy as just look on the bright side. But, unfortunately, it takes some effort. It takes some effort. It's not always easy. But
well, as you said, planning for the rainy day. So you've got your bowl full of gratitude markers. You've got your Post-it on the mirror saying, what you have to be grateful for, whether it's I have great hearing, that's something to be grateful for. Anything.
I woke up today. Sometimes,
roof over my head.
Yeah.
All things. Those are big things. Big things that we lose sight of, because when we lose hope, we become myopic in that vision of negativity. It's very easy to go down that spiral.
So, hopefully, you guys have all enjoyed this talk. I see Sears, I don't know if I'm saying that right, says, I don't get inspired much, but honestly, you two are really inspiring me and helping me, and I'm getting a lot of other people too, and I'm betting a lot of other people too.
We're all in this together, folks. I think you have to remember that everybody, even if their life looks perfect or Instagram beautiful, everybody has levels of where they just give up, days where they just say, nothing is going my way, whether they're rich or successful, or everything looks rosy on the outside. You never know. People from all walks of life have days where there is no hope. Everything goes wrong, or everything feels hopeless. Your loved one has a terminal disease, and you can't find hope in that. It affects everybody, hopelessness. And it is an effort to get hope back into your life, to bring it back and welcome it back in your life. I'm not saying it's easy. It is an effort and it's a practice. But if you keep practicing every day, focusing on gratitude, focusing on the positives, all this stuff that you hear a million times, but we don't necessarily apply to our normal life. Find the things that spark joy in you. Find 5 little things that is going to be a place where you can reset your mind. Try the breathing exercises. Try the little walks outside. Try the distraction of the mind. Try shutting off the news for 2 days, maybe 1 day at first. No social media, no news. Pick up a book. All of these things will add up to a healthier state of mind eventually. And you'll get used to the habit of catching yourself. It's another thing. That's where we employ mindfulness. Catch yourself in the act of feeling hopeless. Identify it and think, okay, what can I do to rectify this? And stop the negative self-talk. You are not ugly or fat or lazy or any of these things. You are all beautiful. We are all here for a reason. We all have this beautiful time on this planet. We can do little things. We can each play our part in the healing of everything having to do with life, even if it's just a little bit of effort. Take the focus off yourself, put it on something else or someone else. Pick up the phone, call a friend or a loved one, just to shoot the breeze. You don't have to say, oh my God, I'm suffering. You can just say, hi, I was thinking of you, with a smile in your voice. And guess what? That might just work for the moment, and you might have a beautiful afternoon because of it. All it takes is a bit of effort and consistency, and it's not always easy. I can attest to that, but we have each other, and that's a good thing.
Absolutely. So thank you, everybody, for being with us this afternoon. We appreciate you, and we're so glad that you spend some of your week with us. Thank you, Claudia, for taking time out of the middle of your day as well. If you'd like to help support our channel, you can follow, get notified every time we go live. You can subscribe. If you have Amazon Prime, you can actually subscribe to our channel for free. We do have a donate area, although that is, and it's appreciated, but not required. We do keep these open and available for everyone, because we want the information out there and as accessible as possible. So that's why we keep them free. We keep them online. They are recorded. They stay on our Twitch. They go on our YouTube. You can see them on our social media. It just, share it with anyone that you feel it'll help. Next week, get ready for a doozy of a stream. Claudia and I are going to be working on tackling the tough TSM questions.
Folks.
As we continue to wrap up here, I'm going to allow you guys to see a slideshow of what the questions are. So these are things we are going to cover in depth next week. These were user-generated questions. We've been asking for them through our Facebook, specifically through our Facebook peer support groups, and going through what some of the most common difficult questions are that we usually start answering with the phrase, well, it depends. So that's on tap for next week. And then the following week, to continue and wrap up a month of hope and a month of new beginnings, we are going to share TSM success stories. If you have a TSM success story, and it doesn't have to be about your entire time on TSM and where you went from before TSM to where you are now, it can literally be the success of your first alcohol-free day, or your first your first vacation success story on TSM. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be detailed, but send those to us. You can do that either through our social media, or you can email it through our contact form on our website. We want to share as many TSM success stories, and that's coming up in 2 weeks. I believe Claudia is going to perform them. You're going to pick a couple from Journeys.
Okay. Okay.
I've got some that I've collected off of social media. We've got our crusaders have been asked to send in some of their stories as well. And if you read if you're in one of our peer support groups and you see somebody's story that is a success story, again, big or small, it really doesn't matter. A success is a success, and we want to celebrate them all. Tag us or bring it to our attention so that we can reach out to the person and get their permission to share as well. So thank you, everybody. We will see you next week.
Thank you. Thanks. Take care.